My name is Juniper Vale, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the Chief Technology Officer of Helix Dynamics, the company I helped build from a garage in Palo Alto into a $2.3 billion AI infrastructure powerhouse. I didn't just write code there, I bled for that place. Slept on beanbags during product launches, missed my sister's wedding because our servers crashed during a critical demo, held the hands of engineers who cried after 72-hour sprints. Helix wasn't just my job, it was my second heartbeat. Then came the acquisition. Vantacore, one of those faceless tech conglomerates with more lawyers than engineers, bought us for $3.1 billion. The press release called it a strategic synergy. The champagne flowed at the announcement party. I remember standing near the ice sculpture shaped like our logo, a double helix made of light, watching the new CEO, Marcus Thorne, clink glasses with investors like he just won the lottery. He hadn't built a single line of our core architecture. He hadn't stayed up nights debugging neural net failures or fought boardroom battles to keep our ethical AI charter intact. But there he was, grinning like he'd birthed Helix himself. And me. I was supposed to stay on. Key leadership continuity, they'd said. Your vision is critical to integration, they'd promised. I believed them. Stupidly. The firing came on a Tuesday. Not via Zoom. Not even an email. A security guard showed up at my office door at 8:03 a.m., handed me a manila envelope and said, "Ms. Vale, you're to collect your things and leave the premises immediately." Inside the envelope, a termination letter citing redundancy and a severance offer that barely covered my student loans. No warning. No conversation. Just gone. Like I was a piece of outdated hardware they'd unplugged without saving the data. I stood there in the empty hallway, still holding my coffee, black, 2 sugars, the way I'd drunk it every morning for 12 years, and felt something inside me snap. Not sadness. Not shock. A cold, quiet fury that settled into my bones like frost. Because Marcus Thorne didn't just fire me. He erased me. And that's when I remembered the fail-safe. You see, when you build something as complex as Helix's neural orchestration layer, the system that routes data, manages AI training clusters, and secures petabytes of client information, you don't just hand over the keys and walk away. Especially not to a company like Vantacore, whose idea of ethical AI was whatever maximized shareholder value that quarter. So during the final weeks of negotiation, while their lawyers were busy shredding our employee handbooks and rewriting our mission statement, I'd embedded a ghost protocol deep in Helix's core architecture. Not a virus. Not malware. Something cleaner. Something surgical. A kill switch. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was my insurance policy, a silent subroutine that could, with the right sequence of triggers, initiate a cascading data purge across Helix's entire infrastructure. Not just delete files. Erase them beyond forensic recovery. Scramble encryption keys. Corrupt metadata. Turn $600 million worth of proprietary AI models, client datasets, and training pipelines into digital ash. I never thought I'd use it, but Marcus Thorne looked me in the eye at the acquisition party and said, "Your family, Juniper." Then he threw me out like yesterday's trash. So I went home. Not to cry. Not to rage. To work. My apartment still smelled like solder and stale coffee, left over from the nights I'd tinkered with prototype boards after Helix hours. I booted up my old ThinkPad, the one I'd used to write Helix's first lines of code. My fingers flew across the keys, bypassing Vantacore's new firewalls with backdoor credentials I'd never disclosed. They'd changed the surface passwords, sure, but they hadn't touched the deep layer-off tokens, the ones tied to my biometrics, my old SSH keys, the digital fingerprints only I knew how to forge. It took me 36 hours straight. No sleep. Just black coffee, protein bars, and the hum of my laptop fan sounding like a war drum. I mapped their new network topology, identified the choke points, and threaded my ghost protocol through the cracks in their overconfident security. Vantacore thought they'd absorbed Helix. They hadn't. They'd swallowed a time bomb with my name on it. At 4:17 a.m. on the 4th day after my firing, I typed the final command. Enter sequence, Juniper_Vale_AUTH_override_delta. The screen blinked once. Then a single line appeared. Initiating purge protocol. Estimated data loss. $600 million. Confirm. My hand hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't just revenge. This was annihilation. $600 million of Vantacore's newly acquired crown jewel would vanish. Clients would sue. Stock would plummet. Marcus Thorne's golden parachute would turn to lead. And me. I'd be the most wanted woman in Silicon Valley. Federal charges. Civil suits. Maybe even prison. But then I thought of Lena, my junior dev who'd coded through her chemo treatments because she believed in our mission. Fired last week for cultural misalignment. I thought of Raj, our lead ethicist, who'd resigned after Vantacore scrapped our bias detection protocols to speed up deployment. I thought of the 12 years I'd given Helix, the birthdays missed, the relationships sacrificed, the dreams poured into every line of code, and how Marcus Thorne had treated it all like a disposable asset. I pressed enter. The screen flashed white. Then green text scrolled rapidly. Purge sequence engaged. Deleting training datasets. Client_A, client_B, client_C. Corrupting model weights. Helix Omega, Helix Nova, Helix Sentinel. Obliterating encryption keys. Master_root, backup_vault, legacy_archive. I leaned back, hard hammering, and watched the numbers climb. $50 million gone. $120 million. $300 million. Each line of code erased was a brick in the wall I'd spent a decade building, now crumbling to dust. It should have felt like loss. Instead, it felt like justice. My phone buzzed violently on the desk. Then again, and again. News alerts. Texts from former colleagues. A call from an unknown number with a DC area code. I ignored them all. Let them panic. Let Marcus Thorne sweat as his billion-dollar acquisition turned into a smoking crater. But here's the thing they don't tell you about revenge. It's never clean. It's never just about the person who wronged you. As the purge hit the $500 million mark, a new alert popped up on my screen. Unexpected, unscripted. Warning, client_D backup cluster detected in offsite vault. Purge incomplete. Client D. My stomach dropped. Client D was Children's Hope Foundation, a nonprofit using Helix's predictive models to match bone marrow donors with pediatric cancer patients. Their data wasn't just proprietary, it was lives. And my ghost protocol was about to wipe it clean. I slammed my palm on the desk. No! I'd been so focused on burning Vantacore's empire, I'd forgotten the collateral. The innocent. The very people Helix was built to help. My fingers flew again, trying to isolate Client D's cluster, to carve it out of the purge path. But the protocol was designed to be unstoppable once triggered, a feature, not a bug. I'd made it that way to prevent exactly this kind of interference. Sweat beaded on my forehead. Think, Juniper. Think like you did in the garage. What's the backdoor to the backdoor? Then I remembered. During Helix's early days, we'd built a sanctuary partition, a hidden, air-gap storage segment for ethically sensitive projects. Only 3 people knew it existed. Me, Lena, and our late co-founder, Daniel. Daniel had insisted on it after we lost a refugee resettlement dataset to a hack. Some data, he'd said, is too human to risk. I'd moved Children's Hope into that partition last year after Vantacore started pressuring us to monetize nonprofit clients. But was it still there? Had Vantacore's engineers found and deleted it during their integration sweep? I rerouted my connection through a proxy server in Reykjavik, masking my IP, and pinged the sanctuary partition's coordinates. Silence for 3 agonizing seconds. Then a response. Sanctuary_partition_active. Encryption. AES 256. Access. Biometric_UTH_acquired. My breath caught. It was still there. But accessing it now would leave a trail, a digital fingerprint leading straight back to me. Vantacore's forensic teams were already crawling through Helix's logs. One wrong move, and I'd be handing them the smoking gun. But those kids, their donor matches, their second chances. I didn't hesitate. I plugged in my old fingerprint scanner, the one Daniel gave me as a joke gift, shaped like a tiny owl, and pressed my thumb to the sensor. The screen flickered. Biometric match, Juniper Vale. Welcome home. Tears pricked my eyes. Daniel, you beautiful, stubborn ghost. I initiated an emergency data vault, a one-time, encrypted tunnel that would siphon Children's Hope's dataset into a secure cloud locker I controlled. It would take 22 minutes. 22 minutes where I was completely exposed. 22 minutes where Vantacore could trace me, freeze my assets, send the feds to my door. I glanced at the purge counter, $587 million erased. Almost done. But not yet. My laptop pinged, a new intrusion alert. Someone was probing my Reykjavik proxy. Fast. Professional. Probably Vantacore's cyber response team. They found a breadcrumb. I had minutes, not hours. I split my screen, one window monitoring the data vault transfer, the other scanning for the intruder's origin point. They were good, routing through shell companies in Singapore and Luxembourg, but I taught half their playbook. I deployed a decoy server in Estonia, flooding it with fake Helix logs to lure them off my trail. It bought me 10 more minutes. The vault transfer hit 78%. My phone buzzed again, a text from Lena of all people. Juniper. I know it's you. The Purge, it's brilliant. But they're coming for you. Marcus just called an emergency board meeting. They think it's an inside job. Be careful. I typed back fast. They'll never prove it. And Lena, thank you. For everything. I almost added. I saved the kid's data, but stopped myself. The less she knew, the safer she was. 89%. 92%. 95%. Another alert. The intruder had bypassed my decoy. They were closing in on my real IP. I killed the proxy, switched to a mesh network routed through old Helix test drones. Tiny, forgotten devices scattered across the Bay Area that still pinged our legacy servers. It was a Hail Mary, but it worked. The intruder's signal scattered, confused. 98%. 99%. The purge counter froze at $599,842,103. One final file refused to delete, a legacy audit log buried in Helix's compliance module. Useless to Vantacore, but its stubborn survival felt like a taunt. I didn't care. The damage was done. 100%. The Children's Hope dataset was safe in my vault. I wiped my laptop, burned the SSD with a thermite charge I kept for emergencies. Paranoid? Maybe. Prepared? Always. And walked out of my apartment with only a backpack containing cash, a burner phone, and Daniel's OWL scanner. Outside, dawn was breaking over San Francisco. The city looked the same, glossy towers, fog curling around the Golden Gate, but everything had changed. I was no longer Juniper Vale CTO. I was a ghost, a fugitive, a woman who just erased $600 million with a keystroke. And I'd do it again. But as I disappeared into the morning crowd, blending in with commuters and tourists, I knew this wasn't over. Marcus Thorne wouldn't let this go. He'd hunt me. The government would hunt me. And somewhere out there, in a server farm I'd never see, the last fragment of Helix, the audit log, sat untouched, waiting. It held a record of every command I'd ever run, every backdoor I'd ever coded, every secret I'd ever buried. And if they found it, they'd find me. 3 days after the purge, I was sleeping in a rented room above a laundromat in Portland when the audit log surfaced. Not on the dark web, not in a hacker forum, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Whistleblower or saboteur. Mysterious audit trail points to Helix CTO and $600 million data erasure. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step in the dark. I hadn't just left a breadcrumb, I'd left a neon sign. The article didn't name me outright, but it quoted forensic analysts who traced the purge commands to a biometric signature tied to a former Helix executive. It mentioned the owl-shaped fingerprint scanner. It even included a grainy security still from Helix's garage entrance, me, 12 years younger, walking in at 3 a.m. with a laptop under my arm and coffee in hand. The caption read, "Architect of the system that vanished." They didn't have proof, but they had enough to make me public enemy number one. I packed my bag in under a minute. Cash, passport under a fake name. Thanks, Daniel, for that paranoid offshore ID stash, and the burner phone. Outside, rain slicked the streets, turning the city into a blur of gray and neon. I needed to disappear deeper. But first, I needed to understand how they found the log. Then it hit me. Lena. Not because she betrayed me. Never that. But because she tried to help. After my text, she must have gone digging. Maybe to cover my tracks, maybe to find evidence to clear my name. And in doing so, she triggered an alert Vantacore had embedded in the compliance module. A canary in the coal mine. They'd been watching, waiting for someone to look. I sent her one last message from a new burner. Stay silent. Don't speak to anyone. Not even your lawyer. They're using you to get to me. No reply. I hoped that meant she understood. I took a bus to Seattle, then a ferry to Victoria, then another bus to a town so small it didn't have a traffic light. There, I holed up in a cabin owned by a reclusive ex-engineer I'd met at a defunct AI ethics conference years ago. He didn't ask questions. Just handed me a key and said, "Wi-Fi's off. For your own good." For 2 weeks, I lived offline. Read paper books. Walked in the woods. Let my hand stop shaking. But my mind wouldn't rest. Because I knew Marcus Thorne wasn't just after revenge, he was after control. And with Helix's core AI models gone, he'd pivot. Fast. He'd rebuild. Sure, but not ethically. Not carefully. He'd license whatever half-baked junk he could scrape together to defense contractors, surveillance firms, anyone who'd pay. The world I tried to protect with Helix's charter would be sold to the highest bidder. And I'd erase the one thing that could have stopped him, our technology. Unless, the sanctuary partition. I still had it. The Children's Hope data was safe. Yes, but so was something else. Buried beneath it. Encrypted in a nested vault only I could open, was Helix Omega's final training snapshot. The clean version. The one built before Vantacore started pressuring us to cut corners. The one with full bias mitigation, transparency layers, and human oversight protocols intact. I'd saved it as a memorial, a ghost of what we'd built. But now it could be a weapon. Not to destroy, to rebuild. From the cabin, using a satellite hotspot and layers of encrypted tunnels, I reached out, not to the press, not to the feds, but to the people who'd walked away from Helix with their integrity intact. Raj, the ethicist. Mei Ling, our lead data architect. Even old Dr. Eris from Children's Hope, who'd once told me, "Your code gives kids more birthdays." One by one, they answered. Not with fear, but with fire. "We thought you were gone," Raj said over a crackling line. "But if you got Omega, we can relaunch. Independent. Open source. No Vantacore. No compromises." Mei Ling was already drafting a manifesto. Helix Reborn. AI for human dignity. I smiled for the first time in weeks. This wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about rising. But Marcus Thorne wasn't idle. A week later, Interpol issued a red notice. Not for theft. Not for sabotage. For economic terrorism. The U.S. Department of Justice filed charges. Wire fraud, destruction of corporate property, conspiracy. They froze every account tied to my name, even the one holding my grandmother's inheritance. Then came the call I dreaded. It was Lena. Voice trembling. "They arrested me, Juniper. Said I'm an accomplice. They have my texts. They know I warned you." My blood turned to ice. "Did you tell them anything?" "No. But they showed me something. A recording. From the day you were fired." I went still. "What recording?" "Marcus. He had a camera in his office. He filmed himself signing your termination letter. And he said," her voice broke, "he said, let her think it's personal. But this was always about the failsafe. She built a god in the machine, and gods don't answer to CEOs. The truth hit me like a freight train. He hadn't fired me out of spite. He'd wanted me to trigger the purge. Because Vantacore's real plan wasn't to use Helix's AI, it was to insure against it. They'd taken out a massive cyber risk policy before the acquisition, listing catastrophic data loss as a covered event. By provoking me into erasing $600 million in assets, Marcus hadn't lost money. He'd made it. The insurance payout would cover the loss tenfold. And with Helix's tech gone, no competitor could challenge Vantacore's other AI ventures. I hadn't burned his empire. I'd handed him the match and the insurance check. But there was one thing he hadn't counted on. Helix Omega wasn't gone. It was with me. And open sourcing it would vaporize Vantacore's entire strategy. If the world had free, ethical, state-of-the-art AI, who'd pay Marcus Thorne for his watered-down, surveillance-grade knockoffs? I made my decision that night. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office in Seattle with my hands empty and my head high. "I'm Juniper Vale," I said to the receptionist. "I'm here to turn myself in. But first, I need to speak to the lead prosecutor. It's about national security. They cuffed me, of course. Read me my rights. Locked me in an interrogation room that smelled of stale coffee and regret. But when the prosecutor finally entered, a sharp-eyed woman named Chun who'd once prosecuted a tech CEO for rigging clinical trials, I didn't plead. I proposed. "I'll plead guilty to one count of unauthorized data access," I said. "In exchange, you let me release Helix Omega as open source, public domain AI. No patents, no restrictions. And you investigate Vantacore for insurance fraud and market manipulation." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're offering to go to prison to give away $1 billion AI. "It was never mine to keep," I said. "It belongs to the people it was meant to serve." 2 months later, the deal held. I pleaded guilty. Got 3 years, suspended after 18 months for cooperation. Lena's charges were dropped. Vantacore's stock collapsed when the SEC opened an investigation. Marcus Thorne resigned to pursue other opportunities, code for fleeing to a non-extradition country with his golden parachute. And Helix Omega. It's everywhere now. Hospitals use it to predict disease outbreaks. Farmers use it to optimize crops with minimal water. Refugees use it to translate legal documents in real time. It's in classrooms, community centers, even on old smartphones in villages with no internet, thanks to offline versions built by volunteers. I live quietly now. Teach coding at a community college under my real name. No one recognizes me as the woman who erased $600 million. They just see a teacher who stays late to help students debug their first neural net. Sometimes at night, I walk to the edge of campus and look up at the stars. And I think of Daniel, Lena, Raj, all the ones who believed in building something better. Revenge didn't heal me, but redemption did. I didn't destroy a company to hurt a man. I destroyed a lie to give the truth a chance to grow. And in the end, that was worth every second of the storm.